Hello everyone, it's Shannon here for Hero Arts. In today's video, we are going to create this holiday postage stamp inspired card and matching envelope with the new November My Monthly Hero Kit. We're going to first start with this Mail Art Cling Stamp set. This is included in both the Classic and Premium November kit. I pulled out several images from this set, and I'm just going to stamp them here on this A2 panel of Dove White cardstock. I am going to Copic color them, so I am stamping them in Intens-ified black ink, which is a Copic friendly ink. After I've allowed that ink to dry completely, we're ready to Copic color. We're going to start with the owl here. I'm going to use a warm gray, starting with my light, which is W1, and just going to kind of color along the edges of the wings, the top of the head, and the belly. I'm basically keeping this owl white and just adding in some shadow so that this owl has a little bit more depth and dimension. Once I finish with kind of laying down my shadows with W1, I'm going to move on to W3 and then color basically everywhere where I just colored with that lighter gray, just kind of darkening it up a little bit and getting a little bit more contrast so the shadows look a little bit darker and deeper. When I finish with that W3, I'll go back to my W1 and just kind of blend it out a little bit. Again, keeping this owl pretty much just white with those gray tones. Now I'm going to move on to E30 and start to color the talons, and then YR23 to kind of add a little shadow, and I also use that for the beak as well. Now we're going to move on to the scarf the owl is wearing. We're going to use R17 and then our lighter R22 to kind of blend out that red. So now our owl is almost done. I'm just going to grab a darker red here, just kind of darken up some of the areas that are in shadow, and that will actually complete our owl. Now we're going to move on to the mailbox, starting with kind of the post. I'm going to use E31, just kind of color the post first. This is my lightest brown in my combo. Then I'll move on to E35 and start to add in some of the shadows underneath the top of the mailbox and at the bottom and to the side, just kind of darkening up that side so it has it looks a little bit more dimensional. Now we're going to move on to the little flag for the mailbox. I'm going to use my red combo starting with R22, which is my light, R17, which is my medium, and then R27, which is my dark. And that will finish that little flag. Now for the actual mailbox, we're going to use our warm grays again, starting with that W1, which is our light, and kind of color all over this mailbox with that light gray. That's our base. Then we'll move on to W3 and start adding in some of the shadow. So obviously it's going to be darker inside the mailbox, at the base of the mailbox, and then kind of at the base of the lid or opening, I guess. Or door, there we go. And then we're going to move on to W5, our dark, and just kind of darken up all of those areas that would be most in shadow. And then once I lay down that W5, I went and blended it out with my W3. Now I'm using BG10. This is just really light blue to add shadow to the snow and the envelope, so anything that's white. I'll then blend it out with my colorless blender. And then we'll move on to just kind of coloring some of the little postage stamps on the envelopes with some red and green greens. So that's basically our palette, gray, browns, and then red and green. So I just finished coloring in some of those postage stamps. Oh, there's a little president in there that I'm coloring with my red and green combo. And now we are basically done with the mailbox and all its contents. But before I move on, I did forget to color that snow that's on the door. Just used my BG10 to kind of add a little shadow to that snow. Now we're moving on to this holly branch. I'm going to first start with my green, my light green actually, which was G43. Now moving on to my darker green, which is YG63, and that's actually my green combo. Then I'll move on to a couple of reds to color the berries. Once I finish that, I'll color this mistletoe sprig, again using my green combo, G43 and YG63 to color in the leaves. And then I grabbed my BG10 just to kind of add a little shadow to those mistletoe berries. Now we're going to move on to one of the mice. I'm starting with E30, which is my light brown, then E31, which is my medium, kind of coloring in some of the areas that would be in shadow, and then finishing up with my dark brown, which is E35, and that will be like his tail, his actual back and sides, and then I'll blend it out with my E30 and E31. Now moving on to coloring that little postage stamp that he's holding, I'm just going to keep it white, and so I colored it with my BG10. And then he is wearing a little scarf, so I'm going to color make this scarf striped and color some of the stripes red and then some of the stripes green, just to kind of incorporate those two colors on this image. Then we'll move on to this package. This is going to get my brown combo, so I'm going to start with E30, then move on to E31 for kind of the sides and anywhere that would be in shadow, because that's my medium. And then we'll finish up with E35, which is coloring the darkest points, kind of like where the folds are in the box. And then I blended it out with my E31 and E30. Now we're going to move on to coloring the little string that's tied around this package. I started with R17, which is actually my medium red in my 3 red combo, and then moved on to R27 to just kind of add some shadows. The string is so small that I don't actually need to use all 3 rings to color it. Then I grabbed some of my greens to color kind of this like stamp or label on the package, and then used BG10 to kind of color that little tag. Now moving on to this envelope, I'm going to color with my BG10 to just kind of add some shadow to that white envelope, and then we'll move on to E35 to color the string that's tied around the envelope. And then for the seal, I'm going to use my red combo starting with R22, my light, then R17, my medium, and then R27, my dark. Then to finish up the envelope, we're going to color this little tag that's hanging off with a couple of browns, E31 and E30. And then lastly, we have those little postage stamps. Again, I'm going to add some color with either red or green, just adding a little bit of color to that basically mainly white image will really kind of add some more interest. Now we're almost done here, finishing up with our last image here, which is this little mouse holding a present, starting with my brown combo again to color the mouse, which is E30, then E31, and then E35. Then we'll move on to our reds to color the present. The present is fairly big, so I'm going to use all 3 of my reds. So started with my light, which is R22, then my medium, R17, and then lastly R27, my dark. And then we'll finish up this cute little package or cute little present with our green combo to just color that ribbon. And once we finish that, our images are all colored. I'm going to now go ahead and die cut these out with the coordinating dies. I didn't color the presents at the bottom of the mailbox because we're actually going to cut those off. Now we're going to move on to these postage stamp frames dies. These are included in the classic and the premium kit, and I'm going to die cut these out of cherry cardstock. I'm die cutting 2 of the large postage stamp rectangles and then 4 of the smaller. Then I went ahead and die cut them again out of some heavyweight white cardstock. This is just a scrap that I had. I'm going to keep the actual white postage stamps and put those aside. We're going to use those later for the envelope, but I'm going to use the remainder here, leave it in my MISTI because this is going to work as a jig to help us stamp the frame on these postage stamps quick and easily. So the Mail Art clear stamp set has these 2 frames that coordinate with these die cuts. I've centered the frames over the die cuts, and now I'm just going to ink them up with cranberry ink and then stamp them. The negative works like a jig and holds those die cuts in place while I stamp them. And because the stamp is centered to that jig, all I have to do is now place in some more of my postage stamp die cuts and then just ink up the stamp and stamp them again. So here are all of my postage stamps, all stamped with the frame. And now we're going to move on to our background. I have an A2 panel of sand cardstock that I'm going to ink blend all the sides with this Cup of Joe core ink. So basically completely all around the edges, just adding a little bit of interest. And I really love to ink blend craft cardstock with a light brown and then add some snow. I just feel like it has such a fun Christmassy holiday feel. So now we're moving on to the snow part of this combo. I have unicorn pigment ink. I'm just going to press onto a piece of acetate. Then I will spritz the ink with some water, mix the ink and water together so that ink is kind of watered down. Load up my brush with that watered down ink and then just tap with my finger to release a fine splatter of that unicorn pigment ink over my panel, and this will create the look of snow. And that little bit of ink blending that we did earlier just adds some more depth and some more interest to this background. And I did want to keep the background kind of simple because I want the focus to be our postage stamps with all of our images. So now I'm going to arrange my cherry postage stamps in my kind of like grid arrangement here on my panel. Once I get them kind of in place, I'll then grab that mailbox die cut. I want to know where that's going to kind of fall, so I know where I need to trim the post. And I do want to point out I did put the little mouse with the present on top of the mailbox. I then traced kind of where I needed to cut the post, then erased that pencil mark, and now I'm going to grab my white gel pen and I'm going to mimic the look of that white border that you have when you die cut your images out. So I just colored that bottom, that cut edge with my white gel pen, rounded the edges a little bit with my scissors, and now we have this perfectly cut mailbox that almost looks like that image was always made that way. Now I'm going to pick up my postage stamp rectangles with a piece of press and seal so I can keep them all together, flip them over, and add some foam adhesive to the back side. Then I'll remove the backing on the foam adhesive, and then we'll go ahead and adhere those rectangles down onto our A2 panel of sand. Then I'll remove that press and seal, and we're almost ready to decorate these. The next thing I want to do is just simply adhere this panel onto an A2 top folding white card base. Just a little fine tuning there with my rectangle. So here's my card base. I'm going to go ahead and add some liquid glue to the front of our A2 top folding white card base. Then I will grab that panel and stick it down. Once I get that panel stuck down, we are now ready to decorate the postage stamps. I did go ahead and already add foam adhesive and remove the backing on that foam adhesive on all of my die cuts, and now I get to do the fun part and kind of arrange them over our postage stamps. So I'm just kind of filling up these postage stamps with these images, and once I get them all stuck down, we are almost done with this card. We're going to move on to our sentiment. I grabbed one of these sentiments from this set. There's so many in this set, and each one of them have matching dies, which is so awesome. So I placed that sentiment over some pitch black cardstock, applied some anti-static powder, and now I'm going to ink up my sentiment with embossing and Watermark ink, stamp that cardstock, dip it into some white embossing powder, and then of course heat set with my heat tool. I am cleaning up any stray embossing powder, and now that it's heat set, I will go ahead and die cut it out with that matching die that I mentioned earlier. So with our sentiment done, we just need to stick it to the card front. I'm going to grab some thin foam adhesive strips. These are actually black foam adhesive strips, and kind of place it in that little gap between my postage stamps. That's kind of where I want my sentiment to go. Now, if you may remember, we have like the postage stamps are on foam adhesive and our images are on foam adhesive, so I have to double up my foam adhesive here so my sentiment can kind of go over all of that dimension easily. So now I'm just fine tuning that sentiment, making sure it's nice and straight, and that will complete the card. I'll hold it to the camera here so you can get a good look at all the details. There's lots of details in this card. Really love how it turned out. Love that snow background and the postage stamp details like that frame, and then of course the images just make this card. But we are not quite done yet. Of course, we have to make an envelope. So I have a red envelope here. And remember those white cardstock postage stamp die cuts that we had left over from our jig? Well, I'm going to grab them here, add some tape to the back side, and then just press that tape onto my skin, or it could be your clothing, just to kind of remove some of the stick, and then place them on the front of my envelope. I'm going to use these as masks. So I have our Cranberry core ink here. I'm going to load up a blending brush and then just ink blend around the postage stamp masks, as well as like along that bottom left corner, kind of creating a little gradation here, a little ombre. You definitely want to make sure you ink blend past the masks so you get that whole edge of the masks. I then removed the large mask, placed the small one back down, then positioned that frame stamp for the large postage stamp image, and then just stamped it a couple times on the envelope in Cranberry again. And then I've grabbed that owl that we used earlier, and I'm going to ink him up and stamp him in Cranberry as well onto that large postage stamp. Now I'm going to remove the mask for the small postage stamp. Then I'll position that frame stamp that coordinates with the small postage stamp over our silhouetted image or silhouetted postage stamp, ink it up in Cranberry, and stamp it a couple of times. Now I'll put that mask back on over that small postage stamp. Ink blend a little bit along the edge so this small stamp postage stamp looks like it's over the top of the large one. And then I removed it and then put it back down again because I didn't have quite enough definition. So now I'm ink blending that edge again where they overlap, and that just defines that edge on the left of that small postage stamp. So again, it looks like it's on top of the larger one. Then grabbed our cute little mouse image and stamped it a couple times in Cranberry to complete our envelope. Definitely a tone-on-tone look, but I really love the way that this coordinates with our card. The reds look great together, and that subtleness I think is just perfect for this matching envelope and card grouping. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and envelope. If you have any questions about the products I use, please check out the links below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.